Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're tackling something kind of deep, a really fascinating, maybe even a little uncomfortable question. How is it that good people end up doing bad things? We're going to dig into the little psychological games we play with ourselves to justify our own actions, all based on this really powerful story about a father and his son. So let's start with this paradox. It's something you've probably seen 100 times, right? Maybe in the news, maybe even closer to home. It's this puzzle of the person who seems to live by two totally different sets of rules. And this question right here, this is exactly what kicks off the story we're looking at. There's this young guy, Evan, and he asks his dad this very thing after, seeing another big scandal break online. It's such a great question because it gets right to the heart of self-deception. Those mental gymnastics we all do to keep thinking we're good people, even when our actions, well, they just don't match up. And his dad's answer, it's immediate and it's brilliant. He calls it the right of circumstances. Think about that. It's this belief that our own personal struggles, our hardships, they give us a special pass, a kind of get-out-of-jail-free card. We tell ourselves, look, my situation is different, it's unique, so the normal rules, they don't really apply to me right now. Okay, so to make this idea super clear, the story uses this perfect everyday example. And it shows how this whole justification thing, it's not just a one-off. Nope. It's the first step in a really dangerous downward spiral. And it all starts with a simple cookie jar. And what's so fascinating here is the progression, right? It kicks off with this tiny, super relatable crime. The justification is simple. I'm hungry. But then, every step after that demands a bigger and bigger justification. First, you've got the lie to cover it up. Then comes this sense of entitlement. And from there, it just escalates all the way to shoplifting. It's like a chain reaction of lying to yourself. So what's actually going on inside our heads that lets this spiral even happen? Well, the father in the story, Tom, he breaks it all down for us. He really gets into the nitty-gritty, the internal mechanics of how we build these justifications piece by tiny piece. He calls the first part the tempters. And you know exactly what this is. It's that little voice in your head, right? The one that whispers, go on, nobody's gonna know. Or, and this one's even sneakier, you have to do this. You've got no other choice. It's that part of our brain that's so good at framing a bad choice as the only choice. And when you start listening to those tempters, it leads directly to this next thing, bending what the story calls cosmic laws. This is all about taking those basic fundamental truths like, stealing is wrong, and just stretching them. Stealing is wrong, but hey, this big store can afford it. Lying is bad, but I'm just trying to not hurt their feelings. See how that works? And every single time you bend the rule, the next bend gets a whole lot easier. And that right there, that's the psychological trap. Once you make that very first compromise, it's like you've crossed a mental border. The story points out that once the kids stole those first two cookies, grabbing the rest, suddenly it felt like no big deal. That internal barrier was already down, so hey, why not just keep going? And this quote, wow, it just captures the danger perfectly. It's not some gentle slope. It's a vortex, a sucking vortex. Our ego is just so desperate to avoid feeling weak or admitting we're wrong that it'll do anything. It just doubles down again and again on the justifications until it's created a whole story where it's the victim, not the one making the bad choices. Now, this whole internal struggle, it doesn't just happen in a vacuum, right? It actually builds into a much, much bigger social problem. Because this isn't just about one person and a cookie jar anymore. It's about how this kind of thinking, this corruption, can take root in entire groups, in whole communities. We all like to believe in the power of a good example. We hope that one really good person can lift up a whole group. But the source material here, it presents a much harsher reality. It basically argues that corruption is way more contagious than virtue, and that when you mix them in a group, it's actually far more likely that the good people get pulled down. The analogy they use is pretty stark, but man, is it effective. Just one person consistently bending the rules, justifying their own behavior. And pretty soon, that behavior starts to look normal to everyone else. The rot just spreads, and it often spreads way faster than the good can stop it. And there's actually a pretty predictable blueprint for how this spread happens. It starts with just one or two people introducing a corrupted value. Then other people in the group start to flex their own morals to fit in. Pretty soon, those little compromises, those white lies, they just become normal, accepted. And before you know it, the entire group standard has been lowered. And guess who becomes the problem? The person still trying to hold on to the original, higher standard. So, what do? What if you find yourself in one of these groups where the rot is setting in? Or what if you're just battling your own personal tempters? What's the way out? Well, the story doesn't just leave us hanging. It gives us a path forward. But I gotta warn you, the choices aren't easy. The source really lays out two pretty stark options. The first one, allow the person to face the natural consequences of their actions, to let them hit bottom. The second option is separation. If the group itself just refuses to change, well, the virtuous person has to separate themselves. You have to leave to protect your own morals, maybe even form a new, righteous group. So here's the really crucial point. Sometimes that desire to stay and fix the group from the inside, it's actually a trap. You think you're helping, but really you're just compromising your own values bit by bit. You risk becoming part of the very problem you wanted to solve. It becomes a choice between protecting the group and protecting your own conscience. And all of this brings us to the final, really powerful question that this story leaves us with. It turns the whole thing right back around on us. See, the biggest lie the tempter ever tells us is that we have no other choice. But the truth is, you always have a choice. And just recognizing that, that's the first most important step. So let me leave you with this. You know you have a choice. What will you refuse to tell yourself otherwise?